and Republican strategist, and Joe Borelli, a minority leader of the New York City Council. Ken, it was really interesting hearing that late-term abortion answer because he said something that John Fetterman will not, that Stacey Abrams will not, that almost no Democrat will, which is there should be a limit. Perhaps when a baby can feel pain. Maybe. Let's think about that. But he wouldn't nail down exactly when. So maybe that's why we never hear an answer, because they don't have an answer to when. He could just give us these platitudes.
Yeah, my experience in sort of debating this with liberals is they won't answer the question because truth is not their friend here. And you heard him say, personally, I don't think there should be late abortions. He didn't say how late, but then he said codify Roe. And Roe allows abortion up to the moment of birth.
Yep.
And so, you know, to the extent you want to limit, his limit was birth.
That's exactly.
It seems like it was a bit of pandering because one thing you say on the campaign trail is not likely what he would say in office. And I think on the other side, J.D. Vance did a very good job explaining his position with numbers and facts and statistics and data that led a voter potentially to say, I see where he stands on this and I can get behind him. And that's what you're seeing with Tim Ryan across the board. A lot of non-answer answers, a lot of flagrantly just saying one thing and doing another. And I think that the voters are really going to realize in Ohio, we need someone that's going to tell us the truth and give us straight answers.
Yeah, and we saw a lot of vagueness. He attempted to be a moderate. This is someone who's attempted to distance himself from, it's new. You know, he said, Biden, I don't want you here. Biden, don't run in 2024. Pelosi, I don't necessarily support her. So this is a very different kind of Democrat in the way he's at least pretty blunt about that.
But would designate fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. So that would allow us to use the whole of government approach to provide the resources necessary to stop this junk from coming in. We need to be tougher on China, where this comes from. We need to be tougher on Mexico, who processes it and sneaks it over the border and finds a million different ways to get it here. So we need more border patrol.
I would think if you want to end the fentanyl crisis, you'd want to fund ICE. And to your point, Ken, we have the facts here. So he was talking to the ACLU, Joe, and he was asked, would you commit to ending the use of ICE detainers, which are requests from ICE to state or local law enforcement to detain an illegal immigrant until federal authorities can take them into custody? He indicated he would commit to doing so. It goes on to show how weak-kneed he was when talking to the ACLU about, you know, ICE, funding ICE, and sounding very different at a town hall when you're running for office 7 days from an election.
And let's be clear.
Let me get in a tweet really quick. We don't have time to play the soundbite. We only have a minute here. But he did tweet out, Tim Ryan that is, that some of those answers will come from Republicans, not the extremists we're dealing with every day. We've got to kill and confront that movement. And tonight he tried to take the high road on violence, condemned Paul Pelosi, and then he said his opponent never condemned the Paul Pelosi attack, and J.D. Vance said, maybe you need better researchers. I did. I mean, this is very simple. You condemn violence where you see it, whether it's Paul Pelosi, January 6th, riots. You shouldn't pick and choose like our president and not condemn an attempted assassination from your own mouth on Kavanaugh.
And that's what felt really disingenuous when he was talking about Paul Pelosi and January 6th, but didn't mention any of those other riots. He simply mentioned January 6th in the vacuum, thinking that voters are just going to resonate with that. And the Paul Pelosi attacks, he skirted around it, but he was trying to make it sound like it was an act of extreme conservative violence. And we all know at this point that is untrue. We've heard Hillary Clinton say that. We've heard our president say that. And if you don't consider all of these acts of violence in a whole and just try to paint MAGA Republicans as the perpetrators of violence, you're being really unauthentic. And by the way, if I can add this, in Ohio, the best thing that J.D. Vance could do, Biden's disapproval rating in Ohio is around 60%. That's staggering. So if he should really be, J.D. Vance should be saying, listen, in Ohio, this guy votes 100% of the time with Joe Biden, and he's at a 60% approval rating. I think that will really wake people up and say, wow, this guy's not for us.
Yeah, your final thoughts, Joe. I mean, I thought J.D. Vance did a fantastic job from the violence question, which he just knocked out of the park. Each and every one, it was just like, I mean, grand slam.
With you, we can say now that Republicans have control in a significant way for the margin that is necessary to win control of the House.
Thank you, Bill. Well, with Republicans potentially back in control of the House, that means that the GOP can start investigating the Democrats' disastrous 2-year reign. And there's a lot to investigate. The Hill with this headline: Jim Jordan poised to serve as top Biden foe in potential GOP House. Joining me now to react is Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan. Welcome.
Kayleigh, good to be with you.
Congressman, Senator Lindsey Graham had quite the quote about you. What's the worst thing the Democrat Party wants to hear? Chairman Jim Jordan, referring to potentially chairman of the judiciary. There are going to be people jumping off bridges in San Francisco by the thousands. You know, New York City, they may literally shut down.
Comparing that to what they should have been doing. They could have been going after the cartel. They could have been going after fentanyl. They could have been going after, Fat Tony, the mobster. But instead, this is what the agency at the highest level
Fat Tony.
prioritized. I know him. I hope he's not watching. But this is what the agency could have been prioritizing. And I think we're missing a little bit of a messaging opportunity. Look, we have so many great tailwinds behind us that maybe we don't need anything else. But this is an opportunity to us to sell this to the American public, why they should give Jim Jordan the gavel.
Erin, should they be going after Fat Tony or 22 very kind pro-life activists?
Right. Well, that's the thing. When Jim Jordan spoke with such passion, the one word that comes to my mind is accountability. The three-letter agencies are not accountable for anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what's making it so much worse is the mainstream left-wing media is completely complicit. Whether it's the whipping of the migrants, the COVID vaccines working, Brian Sicknick, the January 6th officer that every single news organization said was bludgeoned with a fire hydrant. We now know that wasn't true. And the Charlottesville Very Fine People hoax. There was no accountability for any of this in the mainstream media. So there are people out there that don't know the truth. And when you have an administration and a mainstream media that are working hand in hand and glove in hand, you don't get the answers that you need. And that's why we need people like Jim Jordan who are holding these people accountable in Washington.
Yeah, because it's not just a story when Border Patrol is demonized in the way that they were. It takes a toll on the morale of the whole agency, and it takes a toll.
It's intended to.
And it's intended, which is the sad part of it all.
Foundations of our republic. The Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans.
Backdrop for MAGA extremists. The state where the sitting governor is about to win by double digits and perhaps like the biggest landslide in modern history in Florida. That's your perfect state?
Right.
Crazy.
And we're about to have a super majority in the state legislature too. So
there you go.
We're about to be able to get everything done. We're also registering for every 9 Republicans, only 1 Democrat. So
Wow.
Florida is becoming exceedingly red. But by Biden saying these things about MAGA Republicans, all he's doing is drawing more conservatives to Florida, the people that say are in New York. Hey, they're still potentially pushing a vaccine mandate here. They're not going to do that to me in Florida. Let's move. Hey, I'm a police officer. I can get a job easily in Florida. So Florida is going to become an even bigger red state with a huge majority. And all he's doing is driving people to the state, and when he's going to go there, no one is going to be willing to listen to that rhetoric. You're saying a whole state of people are violent extremists. That must not be doing well with the American people because everyone knows it's not true.
Think of just the premise of what that quote was saying. You can't shake a stick without hitting a MAGA extremist.
Gubernatorial candidate who did the same. He villainized half the state, and he said he's on the battlefield of love, and we're just on the battlefield of hate. And this was interesting. So in that CNN article, they said Biden came largely at the urging of Charlie Crist. In an interview with CNN on the eve of Biden's visit to his state, Crist was effusive about the president's willingness to campaign alongside him. I mean, is Charlie Crist a masochist?
No.
Yes. Inviting the president to his state like this?
No, Charlie Crist wants a job in the second half of the Biden. That's what
Why
Charlie
didn't
Crist
we
is
think
doing.
of that?
That's what and by the way, this state isn't just so red because of the really phenomenal performance of Ron DeSantis. With the exception of Charlie Crist, they've had 20 years of high-performing leadership.
Yep.
They really have. And, competence counts.
Right.
And you're seeing that playing out in that huge margin in Florida.
It's like Charlie Crist. You're
Right.
exactly right, because this guy, we call him a chameleon in Florida. He
Right.
was a independent, then a Democrat,
just gonna say
Republican,
that.
independent, then a Democrat. I can't keep up with this changing political party.
I think he almost thinks it's kitschy to be like, I was a Republican and then an independent and now I'm a Democrat. And he's swung so far to the left that people in Florida are scratching their heads saying, who is this person that wants to put masks back on our kids' face, talking about transgender issues in the elementary school? And those are the issues, by the way, that people that are very moderate or even on the left say, do not touch my children, leave the kids out of this, transgender kids in swimming and things of that nature. He has gone so far left, people think he might have had a lobotomy, but he'll be okay in the second half of the administration.
Yeah,
He'll fit right in.
He'll fit right in.
He'll fit right in.
Washington.
We have,
He'll probably show up as a woman.
Producer producers, I do think we have this. I'm checking right now, but do we have the soundbite of the two press secretaries back to back, the tale of two press secretaries? If we do, let's play it. If it's not, I'll read it to you guys. This is
president making this case and not the current president.
So I would disagree with that characterization of your question or how it was characterized there. The president has been talking about this almost every day for months now.
Is someone talking complete sentences, not shake hands with the air, not fall off the stage.
not fall off the stage, yes, and not yell at me, please. I'm tired of the yelling and the shouting and the whispering. All right, stand by. Moving to the battleground state of Michigan, Republican gubernatorial candidate Tudor Dixon is hoping to capitalize on the GOP momentum. The Real Clear Politics average shows Dixon closing in on incumbent Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Look at that.
This is really helping her out too.
Right? That's true.
Yeah, your thoughts on that, Erin?
I was going to say, Carrie Lake is really helping Blake Masters. They're just such a great team together. And Carrie Lake has been on the campaign trail every single day. I don't know when she sleeps. She's been out there, and she also pushes back on these liberal reporters with just such a level of inspiration. And I think it's really resonating with people in her state. But I think Blake Masters is a great candidate. But Mark Kelly, he's done a lot. He's an astronaut. But if you look at him on paper, he hasn't been a great candidate. He hasn't been great for the state. He votes with Joe Biden basically unanimously. So I don't think he's good either for that state. And if people really look at who he is on paper as opposed to the shininess of the astronaut label, they're not going to vote for him.
Yeah, I think you're right. Do you think that libertarian support just moves over? Is it that simple?
I agree with Ken. I think they break towards not the incumbent. I think that's probably the best analysis. But I think bigger picture, though, you have Blake Masters, Carrie Lake, you have Tudor Dixon, you have Lee Zeldin, Herschel Walker. All these people have one thing in common. Their opponents used the national talking point the party pushed on them to frame your opponent as this evil, MAGA, right-wing extremist.
And who knows where she is? Probably in a basement somewhere.
Well, what they wanted to do is after, the primaries, Donald Trump's endorsement, although he did well on all of his endorsements, it's going to backfire in the general. And now we see that not happening any way, shape, or form. Even with Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, he's getting very close also within the margin of error.
So true.
So these Trump candidates, let's see what happens after November 8th.
And another one that I want to point out, because he's joining us here tomorrow, I'm very excited that we managed to get him, was Don Bolduc in New Hampshire. He was one who was so extreme and, no, what a bad candidate, they said. I said they, the libs in the media. New poll comes out, Insider Advantage, I believe it was. It shows him leading Maggie Hassan by 1. And we have quite a lineup. Ohio Senate candidate J.D. Vance and North Carolina Congressman and Senate candidate Ted Budd joined the show. Oh, and Don Bolduc is the next day. Here, I don't even know my own schedule.